Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Tharp, and I am here tonight to talk about how we can reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes naturally. So, I'm going to be doing this series every single night. And so I'll start off by introducing myself. So I'm Dr. Tharp. I am a board certified internal medicine doc, and I am on a mission to help you reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes naturally. So, we're going to talk about the five biggest myths when it comes to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So, I think that will help me to address a lot of the misconceptions. And then I can go ahead and tell you exactly what you need to do to address those misconceptions and those things that you might be doing wrong. So, the first thing is myth number one is if I'm not eating sugar, I'm doing fine. And so that is a lot of the women who are struggling with type 2 diabetes and prediabetes are actually doing a lot of things right, believe it or not. You have taken that extra step to cut sugar out, but there's so much more that goes into it. And so there's a few factors that affect our blood sugar, something like sleep, something like like your hormones. So stress, chronic stress, can affect your blood sugars. So, what kind of carbohydrates are you eating? If you're not eating high quality, complex carbohydrates, then that's how you can get yourself into trouble. So, one of the biggest dietary changes that you have to make, number one, you're doing great if you're not eating sugar, okay? But most people with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes are already doing that. So, hats off to you. But the additional step that you can take is to cut out the processed carbs. So, the easiest way to describe what a processed carb is we can describe it as white bread. We can describe it as crackers, so those saltine crackers. Those are very simple processed carbohydrates. They don't do anything for your body. All it becomes is a blood sugar spike. So that is the additional thing that you can cut out of your diet. Now, I'm gonna shock you guys with another point, and that's not just the white bread, the white rice, the processed stuff, but believe it or not, wheat bread. Wheat bread might be that additional step you need to take to get rid of those blood sugar spikes that you're baffled by. So, the problem with wheat bread is the marketing, right? Everybody wants to make wheat bread. They want to sell their bread. So, how are they going to market wheat bread? They're going to market it as healthy. But you have to understand the nutrition label on the bread. And you'll see very quickly just by reading the nutrition label that it's loaded with carbs and it's missing fiber a lot of the time. So if you are going to go with wheat bread, make sure it's high in fiber. Write this number down. So this is the time to get your notepads, okay? Because I want you to make this additional change. In addition to cutting out white bread, white rice, if you're going to stay on the wheat bread, make sure you're only eating one slice instead of two slices, and make sure that that wheat bread has at least 5 grams of fiber. 5 grams of fiber. That's what's going to tell you that you have an excellent wheat bread source. That's a more higher quality. Another form of bread that you can go with is Ezekiel bread. Ezekiel bread is it's more natural, so it's closer to the natural form, and so in that case, it is much better, much less likely to cause blood sugar spikes. So Ezekiel bread is another big change that you can make. So that's one big point that you should take away tonight. Okay, wheat bread, high fiber. Now, the second myth that I wanted to talk about is a lot of the women who I work with, they're not eating and they're baffled. And I understand that, right? You're not eating, but yet you're gaining weight and you're having these persistent blood sugar spikes. Why is that happening? And so this is where, again, the stress comes in, right? Blood sugar responds to stress. So think of glucose in the blood as an energy source. And so when we are in a flight or fight mode, when we're stressed out, when our body feels like it's an emergency, it's going to pump glucose into our bloodstream. But that is when you're under chronic stress, you're not eating. It fools your body into thinking there's an emergency, okay? That you're in some kind of a famine. So your body says, oh no, I need to give you extra glucose. So a stress hormone is produced called cortisol. So a lot of you already know about cortisol. In response to that stress, that cortisol is pumped into the bloodstream, and that cortisol is what stimulates your liver to pump out more glucose. So that's why you're getting those blood sugar spikes, even though you're not eating. So the key here is, so here's another opportunity to write down a change that you need to implement. If you are a busy woman, you're skipping breakfast, you're skipping lunch, you're only getting around to a meal in the evening, or you're only eating lunch and that's the only meal you're getting in for the day. I want you to practice eating 3 square meals for the day. That is the other big change that you have to make. You must feed your body so your body understands that it's not an emergency and you don't need all that glucose. So even remember, you have to eat 3 meals a day, but it has to be reasonable food too. So that goes hand in hand. But it is important to eat. An additional step that you can take when you're eating these 3 meals a day is make sure each meal has protein and each meal has fiber. So that is another big change that you should make. So just remember, skipping meals is actually worse for your blood sugars. In order to maintain good blood sugar, you need to be eating at least 3 meals a day. For some people, it's even more, believe it or not. So the problem I see very often is not typically necessarily overeating, it's actually undereating. So you must eat 3 meals for the day. Make sure there's protein in that meal. Make sure there's fiber in that meal. And you will see a difference with your blood sugars. Now, the other myth, because we're going to go over 5 of the biggest myths that I encounter in practice. So the third biggest myth is once you're diagnosed, there's no going back. So this is why I do this whole thing, right? I want to let you know that I practice differently, and my practice is focused on naturally reversing prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. In order to achieve that, yes, in the only way, actually, the only way to reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes naturally is the way I'm telling you, which is primarily through nutrition and a few other steps that I help women with, but nutrition primarily. And the problem is most people don't understand how to adjust the nutrition because it is slightly complex. You have to have an understanding of the science. And so, unfortunately, because many people are looking on the internet, you're seeing diets that might be healthy for the average person, but the average person who does not have diabetes or prediabetes. So a healthy diet has to be modeled around the diagnosis of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and it has to be modeled in such a way that we control those blood sugar spikes. That's the main thing. Now, if you're consistent with nutrition, with exercise, you with the habits, good habits to control your stress, that is how you're going to naturally reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So that you can recover even if you're on advanced diabetes. If you're on insulin, you can recover. Now, you never want to wait too long. Okay. You never want to wait too long. You never want to get to the point that you're on insulin, because does it get a whole lot harder to turn the numbers back? Yes, 1000% it gets harder. So the sooner you act, the better. The reason it gets harder to turn the numbers back is because when you develop full blown diabetes and you're on insulin, it means that your pancreas is burnt out, right? Your pancreas stops working over time. And so that's why it gets tremendously more difficult the longer you wait, and especially if you're insulin resistant, to turn the numbers back, but very, very, very possible. So that is one of the big myths, the three big myths. So we're on number four now. As long as I'm not overweight, I'm not at risk. So that's another big misconception. So some women who come to me say, I'm pretty small, I'm not overweight, but yet my numbers are high. Why? It's very baffling. And I will say the answer to that is, if you one clue is waist circumference, right? So it's what we call skinny fat. It means that your body is now geared towards more fatty tissue than muscular tissue. You've developed now visceral fat, and that visceral fat is like poison. It's toxic to the body. When I say visceral fat is the fat that you don't necessarily see. It's the fat that accumulates around the organs, so around the heart, around the kidneys, within the gut. So sometimes the waist circumference can be a very, very good indicator of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and the risk of having visceral fat. Visceral fat pumps out inflammatory hormones that then create a vicious cycle of insulin resistance. So waist circumference is a big clue. So if you don't have excess, if you're not overweight, but you tend to complain about your midsection, if you tend to complain that you're always feeling bloated, or you wish you could lose some weight around your waist, then that is very likely the reason that you're pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic. And that is very likely why it's time to make some lifestyle changes as well. Now, are the lifestyle changes any different? Well, I'll tell you, in some cases, I am actually working on helping women gain weight. So, women who are underweight or normal weight with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, I help them gain weight, but it has to be a good type of weight. And I did a video a couple days ago about gaining good muscle tissue. So that is something that we work on together. It does require understanding, calories and macronutrients. So it does take understanding those things. But in some cases, we're talking about gaining weight. Um, and finally, the last myth that I'm going to talk about is medication is the only way to fix prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So as you can tell by the theme already of my discussion, is that absolutely not. Medication is not the only way. So I am sure if you have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, you remember that very first discussion with your doctor. A lot of people, actually, a majority of people have this discussion. And so that discussion is about lifestyle change first. So when your doctor first says, "Oh, your numbers are off, your numbers are a little high," so they say, "I'll give you 3 months to figure it out. And if you don't get that done within 3 months, we can talk about medications." Some doctors might jump straight to metformin as a first line in the case of prediabetes. The first line treatment for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is lifestyle change. That is the cure. Now, understanding how to do it is important. And that's where I see a lot of frustration, is that you're anxious about fixing the numbers. You're anxious about avoiding medication, but then it can be very baffling. And so again, that's why I do what I do. So it's very, very possible. You just have to understand the right way to do it. Now, one of the biggest things that's missing in traditional healthcare, right, is that most physicians don't have the time to sit and to go through step by step how you achieve this. How do you achieve it naturally? They tell you, sure, you can do that. I'll give you 3 months. They may refer you to a nutritionist, but even that resource is limited too. Nutritionists are invaluable. Definitely, if you have access to a nutritionist, utilize the nutritionist 1000%. but there's still missing, there's still a void there, because you have to understand how much of certain foods to eat. You have to understand, and that's not something I can even discuss here. Why? Because everybody is different. So in traditional healthcare system, there's lack of personalized care as well. There's lack of personalized counseling. So that is why I do what I do. My prescription is the natural way. That is the prescription pad that I carry. I wanted to show you exactly how to do it. So, we talked about the five biggest myths. Why do I do this? So I'm going to close with exactly why I do this. I am a physician, okay? I'm board certified, but I am also coming from the place of insulin resistance. And I also suffered with high cholesterol and high blood pressure. So I too was on that path. And I got the lecture from my doctor. So, yes, doctors do need doctors too. And so that was a big wake up call for me. That was about, I would say, probably about 5 years ago that I had that first sobering discussion with my doctor about the changes I had to make. And so that's when I shifted and I started to learn more about nutrition. I started to implement it into my own lifestyle. I was able to shed 43 pounds. 43 pounds. And with that, I noticed a change in my energy. I noticed a change in my blood pressure. Blood sugar was no longer an issue. Cholesterol was no longer an issue. So I am coming from a place, I basically practice what I preach. And so I want you to know it's very, very, very possible to achieve reversal of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. So, if this is something you have been struggling with, I am hoping that the pointers I gave you helped tonight. I know I'm just stopping in really quickly. I think it's important to give you those pointers. Remember, carbs, go for high quality carbs. If you're gonna eat a carb, make sure it's high in fiber and make sure you're getting that protein in. Make sure you're eating 3 meals, at minimum 3 meals for the day. Some people, it's actually more. Um, Now, if you really need additional guidance, if you're really yearning that support, then that's why I'm here. That's why I have the practice that I have. It's a very unique practice. It's called the Reverse Her Challenge. And I work to help women, busy women, reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, because I've been there too. I understand the challenges. And so it's a passion. So if you want to reach out, you can click the link in my profile to schedule a free discovery call, 15-minute discovery call. It's where we can talk one on one about what your issue is and what you want to achieve. It's all about the action, it's all about achieving a goal. So if you want to reach out to us through a 15-minute discovery call, then we can always start there. And if you're a good candidate and you want, to move on, then we can let you know what the additional steps are so that you can transition into finally taking action, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat so that way you can click the link and book that call and start making change. Move away from frustration and start making real change that works. All right. So with that, I would love to take any questions. I love questions because again, it's a way that if there's something that's mystifying you, if there's something that you want help with, if there's something that you're confused about, I can answer that question. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put the question in the chat, or even just to put it on my profile page. I would love to address questions. If you have the question, many other people have the question too. So I would love if you share any questions you have. I'm always open. I will be tuning in the evenings to do this. So again, I can empower you to make positive change. All right. So with that, I will sign off and I will see you tomorrow night. Okay. Bye bye.